everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 4 of Dororo, and I haven't gotten to check any comments yet. I like for scheduling purposes to be a couple weeks ahead with the series, because that way I have a little bit of cushion, not only for spoilers, accidental spoilers and things like that can get out. Although my moderators are really good, so hopefully that won't be the case. But also because, if anything, if I get sick or something, which, I don't want to happen, but if it does, that way I can definitely, have some cushion with reactions to keep on track. So, with that being said, I wanted to get at least episode 4 so I'd have the rest of the month kind of planned out, and here we are. So I will get to people's comments, don't worry. They'll just probably start for episode 5 moving onward. Yay. But in any case, I'm super excited. So far this series has been so good. Like, I've really enjoyed it, and I was comparing it. I'm watching this and Land of the Lustrous on the same day slot. They are very different stories, but they are also both really good in their own right. And I feel like of the two, Land of the Lustrous is a little bit more abstract, psychological maybe, and this is psychological for sure, but it's definitely more concrete and grounded, which I really like about Dororo. It definitely is grounded in a lot of traditional themes, but it takes this really unique approach to it, and that kind of makes sense because this is kind of rooted in storytelling from the mid-20th century, which was borrowing from storytelling from prior centuries. But I feel like storytelling, especially with the advent of anime that, carried from the 40s on, I feel like stories like this are very emblematic of the time and the stories that those authors felt needed to be told. And so I like the idea that we're taking like a late 60s story and giving it this modern animation, but the themes are still there. So I'm super excited. I cannot wait to dive into this and see what's going to happen. So as far as we know, Hyakkimaru, he has his sense of pain back. He has one of his legs, and he's got his face back, right? But other senses have not reoccurred yet. So we're going to keep going with that. And meanwhile, we've established that Tarumaru, he's very much the apple of his father's eye, but he feels a sense that his mother doesn't recognize him, or that he's not getting all of his mother's attention, that her mind is elsewhere. I don't think he knows about Hyakkimaru at all, because his name literally means firstborn, and his dad probably would like to not talk about Hyakkimaru at all. So yeah, about that. What, these two brothers fated to possibly meet each other at some point and are probably going to be enemies? That's never happened in a story, right? That's never happened in a story, right? Surely not. No. Think of The Lion King. I think of Mufasa and Scar, right? The two brothers with very different. Although in that story, Tarumaru would I'm thinking the eldest, Hyakkimaru would be like Mufasa and being the eldest, and Scar would be the younger brother, which is Tarumaru. But in this case, it's a little bit different. Also, that story's based off Hamlet, so it's a little different there too. But we'll just see. There's lots of brothers throughout history that have been fighting one another, without maybe realizing they were brothers. The story that we love to tell, right? Everybody likes family drama in a story, right? So before we get started, I wanted to give a really quick shout out though to our patrons over on Patreon, to thank you not only to those that subscribe on YouTube, you all are amazing. I'm so grateful to you all, but also those on Patreon, you all help me to keep doing these reactions. So thank you. And those people include our philanthropy tier, which is made up of Alex Cornejo, Anime Annie, Be Happy, Bryant Reed, as well as Damage 3245, Dana, Danny Donmai, Devorin, Danger Zone, Destiny Marie, Ichu, Eric, Fisho, Ghostly Turnip, El Freya, Liam Poles, Lyndon, Matthew Palfinier, Murphy, Nicholas, Alexander Q, Moroni W, as well as Shimoyama, Sunspots, Trails, Translucent Men, and I alone am the bitchless one. I'm gonna have fun saying that. So I appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much. All of my love to everybody. But yeah, this series is so good, and it's just the soundtrack is good, the OP and ED are good. I'm having a lot of fun with this series, and it's good to be on different platforms as well watching, because I like to mix things up and it keeps it from being samey. So should be exciting. But we are going to dive into episode 4 of Dororo, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let us begin. You know what's great about this show? There are no previews. Because I usually don't look at previews, but let me tell you, when there are previews, it is very tempting. It is very tempting for a reactor to go, oh, well, maybe we'll just look at the previews, but I don't want to do it because I don't want to be spoiled. And luckily, the platform I'm watching this on, you don't get that opportunity. You don't get a choice. There are no previews. They're like, you'll watch it when you watch it. And I'm like, fair enough. But man, what a good straightforward. Dororo is, I definitely feel that Dororo, because this story originally came out in the 60s, I feel like there is elements of that traditional storytelling where it is a very straightforward series. There's still mystery to be had, and there are still questions to be answered, but for the most part, you kind of know what's going on. You're like, okay, baby was stripped of its senses, its body parts, all of these things by demons, and as our baby now young, near adult adolescent is going through one by one and killing those demons, he's getting those parts and pieces of his humanity back. Great. Easy, straightforward. Now, there's lots of questions like what order things are going to go in, how will getting his senses and everything affect him moving forward, how is that going to help him, will it make things easier or harder, probably harder, and what is that going to do to Hyakkimaru? Like, how is his identity going to transform? Because he's built this identity based off of what he didn't have, and now that he's getting those things back, how is that going to transform who he is? There's lots of really cool things, and then there's obviously, like, is he gonna kill Daigo in the end as dad? Like, how's that gonna work out? How is Tarumaru gonna get involved? Because you know he is. So it's like, there's lots of questions, lots of things still yet to be answered, but it very much follows a very traditional plot line of we're going on these adventures, these are happening, and that it feels very 20th century. If you're an English major, you've looked at literature, there are trends in storytelling, right? Like, I would argue 21st century storytelling takes a little bit more of a different approach than 20th century storytelling does, and it's kind of, pick your poisons. But I really like Dororo and how they do it. And I really like the themes that this episode discusses. It leaves some things where they're worth discussing as a whole, but it's a pretty straightforward plot, right? Or so it seems to be. Now, like I said, Hyakkimaru, he gets away with quite a bit without his senses because everybody's like, oh, he can't hear. Oh, he can't see. Oh, he can't do this. So he kind of gets off the hook in a way. But now as he starts to get those senses back, he's not going to get off the hook because it's like he can hear and he's going to be able to see and he's going to be able to speak. I feel like speaking is last. I feel like the last thing he will get is his voice back. I feel like that's going to be the last thing. I feel like now he's got his ears. I feel like sight is next. I swear to you, they keep on teasing us with that woman that if he falls in love with her, and if he falls in love with her and she ends up dying and the demon that kills her, he kills her and gains his sight back to see her dead body. I swear to you, show, don't you do this to me. If it does that to me, I'm going to be so mad because I'm like, but maybe that won't happen. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll be the nicest episode set ever. I feel like, I don't know, maybe it'll be the best episode. I don't know. We're not there yet. I don't know when that's going to happen, but they're teasing us with that little love story there, and I don't think it's from the past. The more I watch that OP, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a storyline in this season. And now he has his hearing back, so he's going to be able to hear someone talking to him, and it's not just going to be Dororo being like, hey! Like damn Navi the fairy following Link around, right? But, so, what was interesting about this sword is that the general, whoever this leader is, right? The sword, you could tell he had not actually done any killing with that sword, which good in a sense, but at the same time, it felt like it was a commentary about people in positions of power, how they don't actually get their hands dirty. They make other people do it for them. And this seemed to be like a classic way of showing that off by saying, oh, the general actually never killed anybody with the rusty sword. He just carried it around as a token or as a symbol of power, but then he gives it to his underling to do it and makes him have the blood on his hands and then goes from there. It felt like a commentary about that. Also, coming full circle with the soldier that didn't want to kill the man. And so the guy was like, well, here, then kill yourself with this sword. But he's too much of a coward to do that. And he ends up killing the man instead with the rusty sword. And then there we are. So we're going to skip the intro and go back to the story of the cursed sword and the Hairu Nahiru is such a cool name. I like that a lot. So I had wondered at first about her being the peasant, and whenever Dororo said, like, you sound like a rich woman, and how did you get that way? I was curious too at first. I liked that the story kind of inadvertently explained it to us. Their parents died, and he went off to the war and was gone for 5 years. So, you know, if the war had ended and he was MIA, then the people would be like, well, we can't find him. You got to pay your bills. He's no longer in the service, so we don't know where he's at. Maybe he deserted, and thus she became destitute. That all makes sense, right? And she cut her hair. I liked her hair cut short. It looked very modern, right? She could wear it well. All the gene pool went to giving her the looks because he did not inherit that. That's for sure. But I really liked her. I'm glad she lived in this story. And I know that's sad to say, but I was like, I'm glad she lived because towards the end of this episode, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to get in the middle of that sword fight. She's going to get killed. Is it going to be like a Hamlet scenario and everyone dies? I was like, oh. And then what's sad is that she ends up living and her brother dies and she's all alone. That's a sad part. And again, that's a commentary in itself about how at the end of the day, violence begetting violence, and it leaves your family alone without you there. It's like, oh. I do love the scene of now that Hyakkimaru has his senses back, even if he can't hear the rain at the moment, he can feel it on his face. He can feel the nerve endings. He can feel the rain. And so he's standing out there feeling the cold sensation of it, right? And Dororo, you know, just thinks that he's, you know, he can't hear. He doesn't know why he's standing out there. And she says, I think he can hear it. And I took that to mean that she wasn't suggesting that he could literally hear it. But if you've ever known someone who has hearing problems or cannot hear, they will say that they can like feel the vibrations or feel that. So in a way, that's their form of hearing, I suppose. I'm glad as of this point, the hearing is not like him getting his senses back wasn't a major handicap. However, I feel like the hearing is going to be a big thing because I feel like sight's going to be the worst because he's been able to detect whether people are demons or not, or if the demon is separate from the human, right? Because the whole time in this episode, he was able to see that it was the sword that was demonic, not the person holding it. And that's literally the only thing that saved Dororo, was that the sword was the only demonic thing, not him himself. And so I feel like once he gets his sight back, that's going to be a problem because will he be able to close his eyes and still sense the demonic presence, or will that no longer be there? And then what do you do? I feel like that's going to be the biggest complication in all of this is when he gains his sight back, that's going to confuse a lot of things for him. And it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. We don't know where the old man went. We don't know where he went. I guess he went off to go do some things and then came back. We'll see. But anyway, so she's a peddler now. She's happily accepted her route as a peddler. I do like the fact, though, that Dororo, when she goes to pray, her hands are like all scuffed up, which to me signified that she's not just making things up. She actually has been working as a peddler, and she shows the sign of her status in her hands. Whereas if they were clean and delicate, you might question whether she actually is leading that sort of life. And then Dororo don't mince words whenever he's like, oh, it's been 5 years. You know, if it's been that long, he probably already did. Like, you know, Dororo, he's our little street urchin. He's grew up in the street, so he kind of knows like, well, I don't know if we should, I don't know if I'd bet money that he's still alive, but, and then Hyakkimaru goes off to find, when he senses the sword. Now, when Dororo's like, where are you going? I'm like, Dororo, you should know by now. Anytime Hyakkimaru runs off towards something, it's probably a demon. You know that. But then we have Nahiru, the demon sword that wants blood. It was really creepy watching Dororo like scamp across the ground and like be covered in blood. Like, this world's so brutal that he doesn't even bat an eyelash at it. But he's like, it's an alive, accursed sword that drinks human blood. I feel, to me, like the brother, who is Tanosuke, whose voice actor is Hiroki Takahashi. Who is Hiroki Takahashi? I want to view the bio on him. Give me the bios. He's been Digimon Tamers and something like that. I know he's a pretty well-known voice actor, but let me look up Hiroki Takahashi. There we go. I was like, his voice sounded familiar. I was like, who else does he play? What has he been in? Oh, he was Joey in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay, well, Yugi, not the Brooklyn accent English dub, but yeah, okay. That's where his voice, I've heard it from. I'm like, I know that voice from somewhere. He was Joey. Okay. Oh, and he's also Hisoka from the 1999 Hunter x Hunter. Okay, not the other one, because I think that voice actor is the same one as Oikawa, and this is not the same voice actor as Oikawa. I'm pretty sure. Right? No, don't think so. Interesting. What else has he been in? I'm really curious right now if he's been in some other things. He's been in some... Okay. I'm not going to dwell too much on it. But anyway, so my take on it was that Tenosuke, once he had started killing people, he kind of just fell in line and let it consume him and just accepted. I don't know if he was just accepted he was a murderer and was just going to follow through with it and be like, well, I've killed all these people, so this is my lot in life. This is my fate. What I thought was so fascinating, and probably the biggest show not tell message of the whole damn episode, was that Tenosuke had convinced himself that he's like, oh, the sword's coming for me. It's coming for me. This is my destiny. I'm going to be this killer. I have all this blood on my hands. I'm a monster. All of this. But whenever Hyakkimaru looked at Tenosuke and the sword was the only thing with demonic energy. So at the end of the day, Tenosuke was convinced he was this monster and this demon because of his actions, which his actions were really bad. I'm not excusing him for it. But at the end of the day, he was still a human. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a demon. He was a regular human that just made these choices. And I thought that message was so powerful. And they didn't even dwell on it. They didn't even point it out. It was just there on the screen. I was like, oh, so good. So good. I love messages that are like, if you're paying attention, you see it like that. I'm like, oh, that's so damn good. So yeah, so the episode, again, pretty straightforward. And at one point when they're sword fighting, Tenosuke says, you're like me. And he points being like, you have this, there is a demon in that blade. Now that part's interesting because Hyakkimaru, when we see him, we've seen his silhouette before from the blind man, and he's not a demon. He's not a spiritual entity. Not really. So whenever Shinosuke says there's a demon in that blade, it almost seems metaphorical. Like, you're a killer like I am. You have bloodlust like I do. And he says it almost makes it seem like he's saying it's a choice, like it is for him to choose to use Nihiru. So that part was interesting for me. I don't know the answer to that question. Jukai is convinced that he's made Hyakkimaru into a killer. And so I would be curious to see if Hyakkimaru gains his senses back and eventually meets Jukai again, what they would talk about, if they would bring that up or not. That would be interesting to see. I don't know. But this show is also super clever. I really love that they did a little tiny foreshadowing. They showed us as they were backing up, they showed us his fake foot, and you were like, oh, okay, he still has a fake foot, not a real one too. And then they showed him using the fake foot to snag the sword and throw it off. Like, I thought that was super clever, and I loved that. Also, it's kind of funny to see, like, Hyakkimaru with his, like, real leg, and his fake one's gone. He's got his little hand blades. And then whenever Dororo showed up in that moment, I thought that he had spare legs, which you would think you'd have spare legs, but I guess Jukai just gave him one. Can't pack too much in his bag, and so it was his hand there. Now, noteworthy is that Hyakkimaru touches the cheek that has the blade, the scar, like he's felt pain for the first time. He's like, oh shit, I have a cut. But then I was like, I would not have sent Dororo after the blade, but Hyakkimaru probably, since he can't hear or see, knows exactly what's going on. I'm just glad that and this felt the moment that I saw this going on, one, the brother didn't die from falling off that cliff. 9 lives, cat of 9 lives. There's a set of not mountains, but they're hills and stuff, and a lot of hiking area where I'm from that's nearby. And there's been a lot of people like lose their life from falling down hills like that. I'm like, dude, you didn't even break a bone. But the thing that definitely gives away to me that this is like a mid 20th century story is that, and I'm glad for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm super glad. But Dororo, when he gets the blade, he doesn't kill anyone. Thank God. I was thinking of, well, if this were Berserk, that kid would have slaughtered a village by now. In Berserk land, that kid would have already killed 5 people. But maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe Miura wouldn't do that. But no, Miura's had kids kill in Berserk, so I can't say that. No, it could have happened. So I was like, oh. But also, I feel like in modern anime, they would have made like the kid murder somebody because of the shock of it all. But here, Dororo is a very innocent soul. And I like that the sword doesn't make him kill anyone. I was like, okay, let's keep it classy, San Diego. And so I'm glad they don't make him kill anybody. I'm glad the sword instead wants to go back. It almost seemed like the sword was attracted to easily corruptible individuals or people that have very weak hearts, which you could argue Tenosuke is one of them. And Dororo seems like he has a tough heart. He's got a good heart. So the sword's like, I don't want to, you're not corruptible. I don't want you. Let's go find that other guy again. Right? He killed a lot of people for me. You're just a kid. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I felt so bad for the sister. Like she finally had her brother back and he had to die. I am glad when Doro slashed that one guy, it just cut his robe open, which felt like a 1960s gag too. Again, I'm going to try not to dwell in future episodes about it, but it struck me today when I decided I was going to watch this. I was like, this series originally came out in 1969. Okay. But I love it. I love the way it handles things, and it feels so different from other anime that I'm watching right now, and it feels like it's more timeless isn't the right word, but it feels cozy in a weird way, and I don't know how else to describe it. So the hydrangeas, them damn bisexual hydrangeas. No, I'm making a joke from another anime I've watched, which is as far removed from this as possible, kind of. Buddy Daddies, which is a great series, but there's a joke about the hydrangeas that show up in it, and I called them bisexual hydrangeas. There are hydrangeas in like every anime that has like a sad scene related to family. Hydrangeas everywhere, but they symbolize gratitude, and they also symbolize bonds. And so I feel like it's appropriate to have them here with the sister and the brother. I didn't recognize the brother. They did the traditional where they shaved the front of their head for being a soldier, and then the hair's tied back and it wasn't white. And so as soon as he starts killing all those people, his hair turns white like he's a 1980s villain in a sci-fi movie, and his like hair comes out of the bandana. And he looks like Christopher Lloyd, But yeah. She brings back selling like paper cranes and saying that when I was a kid and would cry, what does she say there? No matter how much my mother tried, I'd keep crying and crying. And when that happened, you'd come to me and you'd make a crane. And I'd sit there and gaze at the crane and I wouldn't cry anymore. The sad thing is like the crane motif, like when he looked at the crane as he was about to kill the guy, it felt like he was thinking of his sister and like, I have to get out of here. I can't die. My sister will be all alone sort of situation, and just all the imagery with the blood on his hands and all of that. And he feels like based on what he's done that he can't have that same relationship with his sister. And the sad thing is she was going to completely accept him. She knew he killed all those people, but she loved her brother, and she's like, I'm still going to love you. It's going to be okay. And she felt like she could be there for him. And I feel like a lot of people with their family members feel similarly, and it's just that family bond. Like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. But I felt for her because she was willing to forgive him just to have him back in her life. I'm also glad that Hyakkimaru just wanted to get the sword out of Dororo's hands. It's hard for us to gauge what Hyakkimaru is thinking, and it's hard for us to gauge exactly what his goal is because he just doesn't talk, and you can't get a perspective from the only thing you see from his point of view is what he sees, which is the energy, right? So, but you don't really get an internal monologue from him at all. We've not gotten one monologue internally from Hyakkimaru to know what he's thinking. So, which is interesting because once he starts getting his other senses back, especially if he can talk, I wonder if that's going to affect anything. I don't know, but we're going to see. If if he gets his voice back and can talk to Daigo, that would be amazing. I want him to talk to Daigo. I want him to be like, I'm your kid. I want him to talk to Daigo. I need Daigo to get some comeuppance, and Daigo's freaking out, so we're just going to see where that's going to go. But I felt bad for Tenosuke because she's like, what made you like this? And the sad thing is, of course, the leader of this army, he's killing everyone because he's, steeped in fear that they're going to betray him. So let's just kill them before they can betray us. And the brother was a good guy that didn't want to kill a man. And he's like, well, then kill yourself. And the thing about it is, if he opened up the blade and tried to kill himself, it'd be a rusty blade. That's insane. But he didn't do it. Instead, he killed the man. But then he that poor guy, he didn't get instantly beheaded. He just got cut in the neck with a rusty blade and then had to sit there and suffer. Oh my God. And then he just kept going through and slicing all those people. And Nihiro got sharper and sharper. Oh my God. And then he's like, the sword wants more blood. And by that point, his hair had already turned white. That's so crazy. And she tries to convince him not to go, but he just shoves her away. And she's like, I couldn't defend the house nor the land on my own. She's like, it's long gone. She's like, but with you here, we could live like before. I feel like there's, what does it say something about, veterans coming back and readjusting and how, you can't go back to what that life was like before if you've been involved in conflict like that? Does it say something, a message such on those lines? She wants to go back to this nostalgic past, and he's so tainted by what he's done that he doesn't believe that that's possible. And it's just so heartbreaking because he ends up just leaving her. She goes to him and she's like, brother, and he's just he doesn't think it's possible, and he shoves her away. It's so hard to watch again. He says, that sword's calling for me. It's like he chooses to go back to the violence rather than leave it, and it ends up killing him. If he had just left the sword, then I'm sure that Hyakkimaru could have just cut the blade eventually, and that would have been that, and just kept other people from grabbing it. I'm glad they destroyed the blade so that then nobody could get a hold of it. I'm glad that happened, because I didn't want there to be this blade, then somebody else picked it up, and it's a horror movie part 2. I'm glad they destroyed it so that no longer it killed the demon and wasn't active anymore. But this whole scene here where she asks him to stay and the brother shoves her away, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the series Monster that I finished last year. Such a good series. But that series, one of the themes is this idea of just letting go. And the further you sink into darkness, the less likely you're able to get out. And that's some of the main characters in that series. They struggle with the fact that the deeper they get into the darkness, the harder it is for them to find a way back to the light. And I feel like Tenosuke, he just got too far in and he couldn't go back. And it sucks. Poor Dororo, though. Hyakkimaru, he collapses into him and he's like, I don't know what to do to this kid. And he just gets him out of the way. And then, Tenosuke saying, the sword is mine. It sucks. And the fact that she had to see her brother die, I kept thinking she was going to get right in the middle of it. But the thing about it is, I want to go back to that moment where he says, don't kill my brother. And he goes there, and that's when Hyakkimaru, he slices through the sword and him. Oh, that sucks. And the 2 cranes. And at that moment, that's when he gets his hearing back. And what a thing to hear for the first time. The first sounds you hear after getting your hearing back are a woman crying and wailing and the sound of the rain. I feel like for Jukai was afraid. Jukai was afraid because he didn't know that Dororo was going to become this killer and a monster because he didn't have any senses and he couldn't feel pain. So that means he didn't know right from wrong in Jukai's eyes, and that he wouldn't be able to feel pain, so he would just keep on going without fear. Now, it'll be interesting for Jukai to meet him to see that he not only can feel pain, but he can now hear what the aftermath of what he does causes, which before he didn't have that knowledge. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this affects him moving forward and what he's going to do with it. But then we go back to the temple, and yeah, what's interesting is that the demon statue that gets hit by lightning is one that's got like blood splashes all over it, like it, and has this giant smile, kind of like what was on Tenosuke's face. And Daigo's like, well, shit, what's happening? Oh no, all these demons I was worshiping, what do we do? And then he's like, where's the midwife? And I'm like, bitch, she died like 17 years ago. You are not finding that body. In the words of Reba McEntire, that's a body that'll never be found. Like, nope. And so then what does he say there? I want to go back to that scene where they're like, no sign of the midwife and no sign of the baby. So we've searched everywhere, which I don't know how they think they're going to find the baby. Nothing about the baby either. Which, I mean, granted, I could see why he would go around being like, hey, have you seen a kid with no skin and no eyes and no nose or no face? Have you seen this? I mean, logic would tell you the baby wasn't alive, but Daigo's like, no, I know better. Something's up. What are we going to do? I would have that look on my face if I was Daigo too. I would be a bit worried. I'd be very worried, actually. But we'll see. So I want to go to the end of the episode and go back to that little, the end of the end credit scene is this little house. It's like a little shrine. And at the shrine are 2 cranes. Just sad. So yeah. So Nihiro. The story of the cursed sword. Well, that was lovely. That was great. I'm getting more and more worried the more senses that it's like a double-edged sword, literally, because the more senses he gets back, the more Hyakkimaru is going to get to experience the world. And in some respects, the better that is, but in other respects, it's going to cause him more pain. And I don't want to see him in pain. But that's going to happen. I just need to brace myself for it. So, yep. In any case, I'm really excited. I hope you all are too. I'm curious to hear your comments down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah. I'm back real soon with more of Dororo. Bye.